I've been researching true crime cases for the last 3 years, and I still think about this one all the time. ᵁᵗᵱ was a 28-year-old German man who went on vacation with a bunch of his friends to Bulgaria in 2014, and that's when he went missing. So here's what we do know. Allegedly on the last day of his trip, he got into a bar fight with 4 other dudes about football. The fight resulted in him rupturing his eardrum, and he went to the doctor for it, and they said, hey, listen, we're gonna prescribe you some medicine, but we don't think that you should fly yet. Let your friends go back to Germany first, and then you can fly out later. So his friends leave back to Germany, and he gets an airport hotel, and that's where he starts acting really suspiciously. He starts calling his mom and whispering to her, there's 4 men trying to kill me, they're coming after me, please cancel all of my credit cards. The last time he was seen was on CCTV footage at the airport, and a witness claimed to have heard Lars say, I don't want to die here, I've got to get out of here. He left running out of the airport, leaving all of his luggage. He only had the clothing that he was wearing and ran into the woods behind the airport, and he was never seen again. I still always think about this one. Where do you think he is today? Let's go down the rabbit hole that is murder at White House Farms. This is White House Farms, where a family of 5 was found dead. Now, at first, the police believed that Sheila, who was diagnosed with schizophrenia, had murdered her 2 children and her 2 parents before taking her own life. They believed it was murder-suicide. Sounds like a shut and done case, Stephanie, so what's the big rabbit hole? Well, here's the thing. The police later find out that the shotgun is too long for Sheila to pull the trigger and being on the receiving end of it. So if Sheila didn't do it, then what happened at White House Farms? There's also lots of questions about the evidence and the handling of the case. I just binged the whole HBO series about this, and they also have a podcast where each episode gets more and more dark and more mysterious. Click the link in the bio to enjoy HBO Max today, but also watch the series because it's honestly so mysterious and so eye-opening. If you love Hello Kitty, I'm about to ruin it. So this right here might be the most haunted Hello Kitty doll that has ever freaking existed. So it all starts when a 14-year-old girl goes to the police and she's like, help me, there's a woman trapped inside my Hello Kitty mermaid doll and it's haunting me. The police investigate. The police never really believed her until they looked inside the Hello Kitty doll and they found the decapitated head of a woman inside, which belonged to Fan Man Yi, who was a local hostess at a nightclub. And one day she was so desperate for money and drugs, she decided to steal the wallet of one of her clients, and it contained thousands of dollars inside. It was this dude's wallet. So he's a 34-year-old, and he and his henchmen decided that he was gonna just kidnap her and pimp her out to make his money back plus interest. But this bozo decides when they kidnap her that, wait a second, we could do something more fun. We could just torture her for the next month until she dies. And remember that 14-year-old girl in the beginning of the story? Yeah, that's his girlfriend. He's 34. So they torture her for a month until she dies, and when she finally does, they decide to chop her up into pieces and cook her on the stove. And they sew her decapitated head into the Hello Kitty doll. And then he gave the doll to his 14-year-old girlfriend. A witch in Malaysia was executed, and her last words were, I will never die. This is her. Mona Fandey is a pop star turned witch because when she wasn't making enough money with pop music, she was like, I'm just gonna become a black magic shaman, as one casually does. So Mona and her husband start offering their services to high-profile clients, but the money doesn't start coming in until politicians secretly go to her to get more power. And Mazlan was one of them, and she told him, if you want more power as a politician, you have to pay me $600,000, and I will get you a talisman, a cane, and this hat that belonged to President Sukarno. They told him that this was going to get him power, but to seal the deal, they needed to do a ritual where he had to lay down facing the ceiling, close his eyes as they placed flowers all over him, and she told him to keep his eyes closed and just wait for the money to fall down on his face. And that's when she, her assistant, and her husband bits and took an axe and chopped off his head. They wanted the money, but they couldn't follow through with the promise of power. But they got caught and sentenced to death. Last meal, KFC. Last words, I will never die.
What is a crime that happened in your area that you think everybody should know?
This is Maddie Clifton. I personally hate that if you Google her right now, her murderer's image comes up before her own image. So take a good look. I'm sorry, I have a lot of rage concerning this case because I was about Maddie's age when she went missing, and she went missing in Jacksonville, Florida. Her photo was everywhere. The community was desperate to find her. My mother taught me like stranger danger from this case, okay? She was missing for a little over a week, and it's insane. So bear with me. On November 3rd, 1998, Maddie Clifton went missing. She was 8 years old. The community went nuts trying to find her, and across the street, the Phillips family was searching as well. Phillips, who was 14 years old at the time. The search went on for so long that they doubled it from $50,000 for a reward to $100,000. It wasn't until a little over a week later that Melissa Phillips, Joshua's mother, was cleaning his room when she thought his waterbed was leaking. When she looked under the bed, she found the remains of Maddie. All right, it gives me the creeps to have him behind me. I literally hate the man. I'm thankful that Miss Phillips ran out and immediately told the cop. He is currently serving life in prison, but like and follow for part 2.
Blood-curdling facts that you wish you never knew, part 21. This photo shows 8-month-old Xiao Bao, who was lucky to be alive because his mother stabbed him 90 times after he bit her while she was breastfeeding him. The world's scariest haunted house, McCamey Manor, requires you to sign a 40-page waiver and undergo a physical and mental evaluation. If you manage to make it through the house, you could win $20,000. But to this day, no one has ever made it through. The little girl who voiced Ducky in The Land Before Time was shot to death by her father, who then committed suicide. Roman Emperor Nero had a boy castrated, dressed him up as a bride, and married him, all because the boy looked similar to his previous dead wife. A 46-year-old man found and attacked a 13-year-old boy because the kid was killing him too many times in a game of Call of Duty.
You said it right there. No one believes a word out of your mouth. Why do you keep talking?
Well, because I know that I've lied before. That doesn't mean that I'm a liar by definition.
You said today you want to give Travis's family closure. You know they want you dead. So why don't you give them that closure?
What do you mean by that? Why don't I kill myself? Is that what you're asking?
No, why don't you accept the fate of the death penalty? So you really are never going to tell the truth about what went down in that bathroom?
I don't know what you mean by that, because I've told the truth.
Okay.
I didn't know that you were a hater when you came to interview me.
I'm not. And that was...
Hi, I'm Cam, and this is the McDonald's Massacre Part 1. On July 18th, 1984, James gathered a small arsenal of weapons. His wife asked him where he was going. He replied, "I'm going to hunt humans." He had been at the same McDonald's earlier that day with his wife and children. This time, James was returning alone with a semi-automatic rifle, a semi-automatic pistol, and a 12-gauge pump shotgun. He told his family, "Goodbye, I won't be back." 45 people were inside the McDonald's restaurant in San Ysidro, California. James entered the building and first shot a 22-year-old woman named Kane below her left eye. She died minutes later. He then shot a 16-year-old employee, John Arnold, in the chest and arm. James yelled, quote, "Everybody get on the ground." He then called everyone in the restaurant, quote, "dirty swine Vietnam assholes," and claimed that he had, quote, "killed 1,000 and intended to, quote, kill 1,000 more. After James's racist rant, 25-year-old Victor Rivera tried persuading James not to shoot anyone else. James responded by shooting Victor 14 times and repeatedly shouting, "Shut up," as Rivera wailed in pain. Customers ducked under tables and crowded together, seeking protection from the crazed gunman. That's when James turned his attention towards 6 women and children huddled together. Hi, I'm Cam, and this is the McDonald's Massacre Part 2. That's when James turned his attention to 6 women and children huddled together. He shot 19-year-old Maria in the chest. He then fatally shot 9-year-old Claudia in the stomach, cheek, thigh, hip, leg, chest, back, armpit, and head with his Uzi. He wounded Claudia's 15-year-old sister and shot 11-year-old Aurora with his shotgun. That's when her pregnant aunt, 18-year-old Jackie Reyes, shielded her niece. James shot Jackie 48 times. Jackie's son, 8-month-old Carlos, sat up and cried beside his dead mother's body. James shouted at the baby and then killed him with a single shot to the center of his back. James then killed a truck driver, 62-year-old Lawrence, right before he targeted another family near the play area. The mother, Blythe, was shielding their 11-year-old son, Mateo. In the booth across from them was her husband, Ronald, shielding their son's 12-year-old friend, Keith. Ronald and Keith were shot numerous times but survived. Ronald's wife and son were less fortunate, dying of several shots to the head. 3 11-year-old boys, oblivious to the shooting, rode their bikes into the west side of the parking lot, ready to order ice cream sundaes. Someone yelled at them across from the street, so they hesitated. But it was too late. James saw them and shot the 3 boys with his Uzi and shotgun. Hi, I'm Cam, and this is the McDonald's Massacre Part 3. 3 11-year-old boys rode their bikes into the west side of the parking lot, ready to order ice cream sundaes. Someone yelled at them from across the street, so they hesitated. But it was too late. James saw them and shot the 3 boys with his Uzi and shotgun. Joshua fell to the ground critically wounded, but he survived. Omar received gunshots to the back and began vomiting on the ground. David was shot several times in the head. Omar and David both died at the scene. An elderly couple, 74-year-old Miguel and 69-year-old Ada, tried walking out the doors. As Miguel reached to open the door for his wife, James shot Ada with a shotgun to the face and wounded Miguel. Miguel cradled his wife in his arms and wiped the blood from her face. He shouted curses at James. James approached Miguel, swore at him, and then killed him with a single shot to the head. After police arrived, James went up to the service counter and adjusted the portable radio to the music station. He then started dancing to the music as he shot more innocent victims. 5:17 p.m., Chuck Foster, a SWAT sniper, fired a single round 35 yards away. He hit James and severed his aorta just beneath his heart. He died immediately. The entire event lasted 77 minutes, and James fired a total of 257 rounds. Killed 21 people.
The suspicious death of Kendrick Johnson, the 17-year-old whose case was finally reopened earlier this year, 8 years after his body was found in a rolled-up gym mat at his high school in Valdosta, Georgia. Kendrick was last seen walking into his high school gymnasium around 1 p.m. on January 10, 2013. He didn't show up to any of his classes for the rest of the day, and when he didn't return home after school, his parents officially reported him missing. The next morning, students at the high school discovered Kendrick's body inside of a vertical rolled-up gym mat. He was positioned head first, wasn't wearing shoes, and had one arm outstretched above his head with the other down by his waist. Because students told police that it was common for them to keep their things inside of the gym mats instead of paying for a locker, it was initially theorized that Kendrick fell headfirst into one of the mats while reaching for his shoe and was unable to get out. The first autopsy ruled his death as an accident by positional asphyxiation. Right away, Kendrick's parents felt that foul play was involved in their son's death, and they weren't alone because earlier this year, the county sheriff announced the reopening of his case. A second autopsy and the reevaluation of previously sealed evidence paints a completely different picture of what happened that day.
One of the most insane serial killers I have ever learned about, I still to this day believe didn't work alone. So you guys know Jack the Ripper, right? Well, this guy not only outlasted and outdid him, but he put New York in one of the biggest states of fear and taunted investigators for years. Before we get into who he is and why I don't think he acted alone, let's talk about what he did. The first kill he ever made was stabbing 2 young girls on Christmas Eve of 1975. At this time, New York was an absolute shambles. People were being killed and assaulted all the time. Robberies were happening, bodies were being found, and the police really couldn't keep up with everything, so whenever this happened, it wasn't like a big news headliner. Well, a few months later, 2 girls were shot sitting in their car. Both of them ended up surviving, but it happened so fast that they didn't have any information on the suspect. Just some .44 caliber bullets left on scene. Well, the next attack occurred whenever this couple was sitting in a car. They reported that the whole car felt like it exploded, and the girl looked over and saw a bullet wound in the guy's head. Because of the bullets used, the police were able to make the connections.
I had never heard of this case before, but one of my followers requested it, and my heart hurts. Today we're going to be talking about Mary Ann Measles. This case takes place October 1997 in New Milford, Connecticut. So 13-year-old Mary approached her mother, Cindy, and told her that she had had 2 older men. By older, I mean like 18 and 21. And of course her mother was furious and told her, like, that's not consensual, that's and we're going to the police. So Cindy took her to the police and filed a statutory claim, but because Mary Ann wouldn't really cooperate, nothing happened. Nothing came out of it. 2 days later, Mary Ann was downtown, and she was confronted by those 2 guys and their girlfriends, and they started yelling at her and getting in her face, threatening her. They were upset that her mother had gone to the police. So she called her mother, and her mother heard what was going on and immediately came and picked her up. So Cindy picked her up, and they went to a grocery store, and Mary Ann waited for her in the car while she went in. But when she came back out, Mary Ann was nowhere to be found. Cindy called the police, but they said because Mary Ann was sort of known to be a runaway, she needed to wait. 2 whole days went by of just the family looking before the police finally joined their efforts, but they didn't find anything. Nothing was found until July 15th of 1998, which is almost a full year after she went missing, when a body was recovered from a lake in the nearby town of Bridgewater, Connecticut, and it was identified through dental records as being Mary Ann. Nothing was really known until October of 2002, which is 5 years after she went missing, when 8 people were arrested. Her family found out in the courtroom what happened to her, which, trigger warning. So basically, when her mom came to pick her up after that confrontation and they went to the grocery store, she was unaware that they were actually followed. So when her mom went in, she was taken from and driven to a secluded location which was known as the Pump House. And the idea allegedly was to scare her. And it was by the older men and by their girlfriends they wanted revenge on her for sleeping with their boyfriends. This escalated to them punching her and kicking her. She got so scared at one point she urinated on herself. They left some of her clothes in the pump house in a abandoned washer that was in there. She was driven to another location that was by a riverbank. Once there, she was forced out of the vehicle and her head was held underwater until she passed away. Trigger warning. She was also sexually assaulted post-mortem before her body was wrapped in blankets and chains and thrown into the river. The state found the 5 men and the 3 women guilty of conspiracy to kidnap, rape, and murder 7th grade Mary Ann.
It just doesn't make sense. This case is strange. Joshua Maddox went missing in 2008, and he wasn't found until 2015. When an unused cabin a quarter-mile away from his home was being demolished, his body was found inside the chimney with his knees above his head, and the police ruled it an accidental death, and they said he climbed in from the top and got stuck. But that doesn't explain how he got in the chimney, because there was a metal grate on top of it blocking the entrance, and he couldn't have gone in through the fireplace because there was a heavy breakfast bar that had been ripped out of the wall and pushed in front of it. Or why he was only wearing a shirt. All his other clothes were folded up inside the cabin. So he would have had to have been inside the cabin, taken off his clothes, gone outside, climbed up on the roof, and then tried to enter the cabin again through the chimney? This photo is not at all what it first appears to be. Part 10. This just looks like a selfie, but it was actually used to solve a murder. It was taken on May 24th, 2015. That is Cheyenne Antoine, and that is Brittany Garwell. And the next day, Brittany's body would be found on the outskirts of Saskatoon, Canada. She died by strangulation by a belt that was found at the scene. And police were able to link that belt to the killer because she's wearing it in this photo.
Hi, I'm Cam, and this group of friends thought they were opening a suitcase full of cash, but it ended up being anyone's worst nightmare. On August 19th, 2020, a group of teens went randonauting on a West Seattle beach. They stumbled upon a black suitcase. Immediately, they smelled the most putrid odor. They opened the suitcase and saw that something was wrapped in a black garbage bag. They decided to call the police. What the teens found turned out to be the bodies of 35-year-old Jessica Lewis and 27-year-old Austin Wenner. Autopsies revealed that Jessica had been shot multiple times, and Austin had suffered a single gunshot to the torso. They had both been beaten and dismembered to fit in the suitcases. The couple, who had been together for 8 years, had been killed 2 months prior to their discovery. The killer, 62-year-old Michael Lee Doodley, their landlord. On June 9th, Michael let another woman move into Jessica and Austin's apartment. When she entered, there was heaps of clothing everywhere. Under a pile, she saw the figure of a person and a bloody hand sticking out. She made a joke out of fear, and Michael laughed. Michael told authorities that the victims hadn't paid $1,500 for rent. He also has a restraining order from his own daughter because he sexually assaulted her.
This is Diane Downs, and you may be wondering, why is this sweet little pregnant lady in handcuffs being arrested? It's because she is a fucking murderer, and she's up for parole in 2021. Diane married her high school sweetheart, Steve Downs, and they immediately started having kids. She always said she wanted to be a mom. Their oldest daughter is Christy Ann. And then they had Cheryl Lynn, and then they had their son, Daniel. Diane got kicked out of college for promiscuous behavior. Steve claims that Daniel isn't his son, and that he is a result of an affair. So they get a divorce. In Diane's words, she said that she had 10 different partners that she had relations with, and less than half of them were married. So then, Diane starts seeing this guy named Robert Knickerbocker. But Robert Knickerbocker was married, and he said that he would leave his wife for Diane. She offers to kill his wife, and he's like, no, let's just move. Part 2 is already posted.
Blood-curdling facts that you wish you never knew. Part 24. There's been multiple cases of people actually being eaten alive by an escalator. If you like to eat cereal, there's a 21 to 38% chance that you're also eating an ᵀʰᵱ. Supposedly, if you have Sanpaku eyes, meaning that there's white below your iris, it actually means that you're supposed to die young. Every time you feel very aggressive, your brain is set to kill for a few seconds. So in that 1 second, you could kill a human being. When getting laser eye surgery, you can actually smell the parts of your eyes being shaved down by the lasers. If you're a male, after you die, your loved ones can have a doctor electrocute your prostate, forcing you to ejaculate for your sperm. Female dragonflies often fake their own death to prevent rape. If you ever get burned by electricity, it will leave burn marks shaped like lightning on your skin. Many pets actually die because their owner dies unexpectedly and nobody comes in to check in on them in time.
We're back on True Crime TikTok. In North Carolina on December 9th, 2001, this 911 call was received.
911, what is your emergency? 1810 Cedar Street, please. What's wrong? My wife had an accident. She's still breathing. What kind of accident? She's down the stairs. She's still breathing. Please, come. Is she conscious? What? Is she conscious? No, she's not conscious. Okay. Please. How many stairs did you fall down? Huh? How many stairs? Stairs. How many stairs? Calm down, sir. Calm down. No, 15, 20, I don't know. Please, get somebody here right away, please. Okay, somebody's dispatching the ambulance while I ask you questions. It's a Forest Hills, okay?
48-year-old Kathleen Peterson was dead. Her husband, Michael Peterson, had made that 911 call. When help arrived, they noticed a lot of blood and that the blood had dried. Michael said that him and Kathleen had drank 2 bottles of wine. She must have been drunk and fallen down the stairs. The autopsy said different.
Staircase Part 2, Warning for Graphic Violence and Murder. On December 20th, 2001, Michael Peterson was arrested and being accused of first-degree murder. The autopsy showed Kathleen Peterson had 7 lacerations to the back of her head, bruising all over her body, and damage to her neck that the medical examiner said could not have been caused from falling. During trial, it came out that Michael and Kathleen were in a lot of debt, and Kathleen had a $1.4 million life insurance policy on herself. Michael was having affairs with men, but he claimed that his wife knew about his bisexuality. In 1985, Michael Peterson was the last person to see ᵁgsmåⵘᵈ alive. Elizabeth was found dead at the bottom of the stairs. Originally declared an accident, the body was re-examined and determined that it was no accident. Michael was found guilty, but later was able to file an appeal and get a new trial on the grounds that one of the main experts who helped convict him often faked evidence. Michael agreed to take a plea of manslaughter and was given credit for time served and released. He claims that he's innocent even today. This video was made using CrimeDoor. They have hundreds of cases, including Kathleen Peterson's, where you can access a 3D version of the crime scene in your own home. You can download the app or visit the website, and make sure to follow them on TikTok at CrimeDoor.
This is why you shouldn't go for walks in Sweden. In 2008, a Swedish woman went out for an evening stroll with her dog, but never came back. Her husband went looking for her and found her dead next to a lake. The police immediately blamed her husband and sent him to jail. After a few months, the woman's forensic analysis report came back, and it was clear the husband was innocent because there was all this hair and saliva on the woman's body that was not his. It turns out there is a very strange phenomenon that occurs in Sweden in the fall when all of the apples have fallen off of their trees. Those apples ferment, and then hordes of moose eat those apples, becoming drunk and oftentimes very belligerent, like this drunk moose who got stuck in a tree. The hair and saliva of the killer belonged to a drunk Swedish moose.
Hi, I'm Cam, and this Jeffrey Dahmer obsessed fan took it way too far. On June 20th, 2020, 19-year-old ᵀʰᵱᵈ met up with 18-year-old Holden White after they had been talking through Grindr for over a month. When the two finally met, Holden said it scarred him for life. Holden said everything was fine until Chance left the room, returned, and started choking him with a cord. Holden was choked by Chance until every blood vessel in his face ruptured. He lost his vision and then his consciousness. And I want to give a warning because this is about to get very graphic. Holden woke up in Chance's bathtub to him slicing open his left wrist. He was naked, soaked in his own blood, and on the verge of death. He repeated to himself, "Stay calm," thinking it was the end. Holden was in a coma for 3 days. On that third day, he saw a light and he went towards it. He woke up with a breathing tube down his throat, wrapped in bandages all over. Holden had suffered 6 stab wounds to the neck, blunt force trauma to his head, and deep cuts in his wrist. Chance had called the police thinking he had murdered Holden. What's even more disturbing is Chance has tried to kidnap and dismember 2 other gay men. He planned on using their bodies as trophies and food.
This is the weirdest, most toxic marriage I've ever seen in the history of life. So this is Linda, and one day she was just hanging out at the Bronx when all of a sudden a car pulls up, stops in the middle of the street, and out comes good old Bert. He was a successful attorney, and he was like, "Listen, you're the most beautiful person that has ever existed. Please date me." So she does, and they start dating, and it was really cute in the beginning. And then she finds out that he has a wife and a kid at home. Now, you would think that Linda would be the one that would be mad, but Bert got mad and he said, "Listen, if I can't have you, ain't nobody gonna have you. And when I'm done with you, nobody's gonna want you." End quote. She reported it to the police and they didn't really do anything, so she ends up moving on and gets engaged to a guy by the name of Larry. So when Bert finds out about the engagement, he decides to hire someone to throw acid in her face. This will leave her eventually permanently blind and scarred. So Bert gets sent to prison for 14 years, and when he's released, this is the kicker. He proposes to Linda. And she deadass accepts. And they get married. She said that the best revenge for blinding her was now that he has to put up with her every day.